All right. Well, Ben, welcome to the show again. You are another repeat guest, although I think last time we had a group of people on. So glad to get somebody like you on here individually. Jake's not going to be able to join us today, unfortunately, but I'm excited to have you on here, man, because you've been involved in the mining space for a very, very long time. You've got a lot of news that you have to share. Obviously, there's been a big news with your recent promotion to CEO over at Bitfarms. So, yeah, welcome, man. Glad to have you. And yeah, looking forward to chat.
Thanks, Justin. Really glad to be back on the show and, having a chat here about Bitcoin at 93,000 Bitcoin. That's always an exciting time.
That is an exciting time. And that's part of what we're going to talk about. Like I mentioned, want to chat about some of the pop on Bitcoin price post the election that we had a couple weeks ago, and just kind of what the outlook of the whole industry is looking to you guys. And obviously you guys are so involved in the space, both internationally, but also in the US. So looking forward to getting your perspective on everything. But so yeah, welcome again. But just starting off, why don't you give everybody kind of a little bit of background on you, that those of you that don't know who Ben is. He's been in the space for a very long time, very knowledgeable guy. So we're lucky to have him. But yeah, if you don't mind, give a little bit of the story to you.
Sure. Well, my name's Ben Gagnon. I'm the CEO of Bitfarms. Bitfarms is, one of the largest and oldest publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies on the planet. We operate about 1.5% of the global hash rate spread across 12 sites in 4 countries. Personally, I've been mining since 2015. So been in the space for a very, very long time. I started in Hong Kong and Taiwan and mainland China, building up with Bitcoin mines, and founded multiple different Bitcoin mining companies, hosting companies, hardware manufacturing companies for immersion cooling container solutions back in the 2018, 2019 era. Been around for a long time. I've been with Bitfarms now for the last 5 years and have worked my way up from director of business development through the mining operations to chief mining officer, and then just took over the role here as a CEO about 4 months ago now, almost 5 months ago, I think, actually, at this point. So it's been a whirlwind. It's been 9 years in the space, and I can tell you that when I started out operating my Bitcoin mine in mainland China, as a 26-year-old white kid, cruising around on a longboard in an industrial park with a bunch of loud Bitcoin miners. I would have never thought I'd be here on this show right now, as CEO of a publicly traded company. It's been a wild ride. But what I really, really like about this space is, there is no kind of hierarchy of multiple decades that you have to work through. This is an industry that works purely on meritocracy. If you can demonstrate your proof of work, you can make it in this industry. And really, your potential, I think, as a Bitcoiner or as a Bitcoin miner is up to you. And I think that's part of what's really attracted me. And I think you meet some of the most intelligent, passionate people in the space, because we're all seeking the same thing.
Right. Man, that's one of the things I love about it. Honestly, I talk about it a lot on here, but I didn't come from a very white collar type background. And so, that always helps when you're trying to get into something. But this is one industry where literally you get the opportunity to make your career be whatever you want it to be. And,
Yep.
and you go from where you were at to being now the CEO of one of the largest publicly traded mining companies in the world. It's pretty crazy, man. I mean, I can imagine you didn't ever think you'd be sitting here. Just, you don't even think about it. And, but it's a very kind of merit-based industry where the cream rises. And honestly, the people who stick it out, which you obviously have stuck it out through several cycles, that's usually, just like it shakes people out from even holding their Bitcoin, it shakes people out of the industry a lot. And kind of the people who stick it out and have weathered those storms, they're the ones who typically are going to take advantage of it on the next cycle. And so I hope that we're coming out of the last part of the last bear cycle and we're entering a new bull cycle. I think it'd be hard to think we weren't with all the kind of, well, the obvious price action, but also the just the environment around Bitcoin and just the subject of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining as well. I feel like there's a lot of like, just with the election results, people are a lot more confident going into this industry and deploying capital in it. And so, it kind of leads me into my next question for you is what is the biggest difference that you've kind of experienced now as opposed to the early part of your career? And really that's code for saying is how much easier it is to get money now for operations and growth compared to what it was when you first got going.
Oh, it's night and day, right? When I started in 2015, there were no publicly traded Bitcoin companies. Bitcoin mining was not on anyone's radar. Even things like Bitcoin were largely not on people's radar, right? When I told my dad that I was going to go into mainland China and set up a Bitcoin mine, he was like, "What is a Bitcoin mine, and why are you going to China?" Well,
I'm never going to see you
new,
again, son.
yeah, it's this new magical internet money, Dad. And if I invest in these computers and I set up a facility, I can plug in these computers, and these computers are going to generate this magical internet money, and I'm going to make a ton of money, and it's going to be great. And you know, everybody just had no clue. But back then, that was back when Ethereum had just launched, right? Ethereum came out in I think it was 2015. And I actually got most of my investor interest from Ethereum. So, people were looking at how do you get Ethereum? How do you get no KYC Ethereum? And I was offering, mining as a service for crypto, and mostly it was Bitcoin and Ethereum. But in the first few days, it was all Ethereum. And I was able to sell back then a contract for, a GPU rig for 2 years. So it was a really, really different time. You could never sell that contract now. Where I was able to pay for the entire machine in 2 years of operating costs and a profit margin upfront day one. And that enabled me to finance my own business. So I didn't need to go out there and do private rounds or seek a lot of family, and friends' money. I invested, 98 cents on every dollar that I owned. It was about $35,000, $40,000 that I invested in the business to get the first basic machines up and running. And then you just kept flipping them and rotating it into more growth. And I was able to scale up my business that way. You'd never be able to run a business like that now. And right. The chances of kind of bootstrapping a business kind of just off sales, I think, is a lot harder. The industry has scaled up dramatically, and it's a lot more competitive. In order to go out there and compete, you do need to raise capital, and you need to raise a substantial amount of capital. I always talk about the kind of economy of scales with Bitcoin mining, and it's super easy to plug in one miner. But when you're trying to get to the scale of, like, let's say you're operating a whole garage full of miners, that becomes really, really difficult, because now you need to start paying for an electrician, and you start paying for specialized equipment, and you just don't have the scale to justify all of the overhead expenses. And so, medium becomes really difficult. You do need to jump from going from one miner. You need to jump from having, several hundred or several thousand miners, I think, to really justify that expense and all of those overheads. So it's a completely different game now. But, you look around at the capital markets, and the capital markets for Bitcoin are very open up. And I think especially after a Trump election, the floodgates are wide open. The conversations for capital really go with the investor sentiment around Bitcoin itself. And when Bitcoin's at $18,000 in 2022, I can guarantee you nobody is calling you up and offering you money. But at 60K to 93K, every single bank and their grandmother is calling you up and trying to get a deal done. So there's plenty of capital to go around, for the large scale players going into a Bitcoin bull market. And it's not financial advice, but I believe we are in the Bitcoin bull market. I think that's very clear. With Trump being elected and the price reaction that we've seen here, this lines up with every single historical cycle and trend that we should expect to see happen. And so we really have kind of the convergence of several different very powerful forces here. I think that are going to be driving Bitcoin price for, most of 2025.
Oh, dude, it's funny how every time one of these happen, people feel like it just happened so fast and they're like, oh my gosh, like I got to catch up. And it's like, dude, this has been being set up for the last 2 years.
For years.
Like every single time, this is a pretty consistent deal. It's just, you still like, cause even when the election was going on, I'm like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I want to smash buy as much as I can right now, cause I don't know what's going to happen and might get more later. And then it works out this way. And I'm like, I should have bought more and I should have freaking smash bought at 65,000. But you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve it. I've been telling people that a lot the last 2 weeks. I'm like, this is why you don't wait for this stuff, man. You just stack and hold it. And
exactly.
But yeah, you're right. I think even when I first got going in 2018, 2019, it was very, very difficult to find capital. And some of the same players that I went to from the equity side, who literally would like laugh me out of the room. Some of them now I get calls from about different projects and opportunities and wanting me to help them look at some of this stuff. And it's like, man, the times have changed so fast now. It feels like it felt like a long time back then, but now I feel it happening very, very quickly. And I think you're right. All the things that are lining up and converging into kind of where we're at today. It's like, man, this went from being kind of a nervous time, not knowing what is going to happen with the election, to like, holy cow, this is all happening very fast. And all these things that, we've talked about for years that could happen, and like a Bitcoin strategic reserve and all these things that people really would have laughed at you. I'm not joking, even a year ago.
Yeah.
They feel very, very real to me now. And it's just like, man, golly, it's like, this is basically what Michael Saylor's been preaching for years. And it's like, this is potentially happening. So yeah, I'm excited, and it's good to see the money kind of coming back into it and people being open to it. One thing we haven't seen yet, though, tied to that is kind of the mining stocks go up. We haven't seen them appreciate with the price of Bitcoin like we have in the past. And I have my own thoughts as to why that is, but do you have any thoughts on why we're not seeing the appreciation on the mining stocks individually or collectively, despite the Bitcoin price kind of popping over the last 2-3 weeks?
It's been a really interesting, last couple of weeks. Even when Bitcoin was at 93,000, the entire industry was selling off. Even MicroStrategy was selling off that day, and I think everybody was confused as to what happens. But these aren't perfect proxies to Bitcoin, and so there are disconnects, right, in time and trends over time. The other thing too is like a lot of these stocks have gone up 50% in the last month. Is it natural for people to take some off the table and crystallize those profits and look for another entry? I think that's super natural. But when you look at kind of the trend that has been prevalent in all of the previous halving cycles around hash price, you see the same thing over and over and over again, and it's this 300 to 400% increase in hash price from between when you exit the halving to the peak of that bull market. I've been talking about this for 2 years because this is what we're getting ready for the hash price increase, right? You don't buy a Bitcoin miner because you expect that hash price is going to go down. You buy a Bitcoin miner because you want to ride that wave up. And you want to make sure that you've got that miner in place to capture that upside, right? And when you look at hash price, Bitcoin's gone up, hash price has gone up as well, but we're still pretty early days in terms of where I think the hash price is going to go according to historical trends, right? We exited the halving around 5 cents, and if you look at the historical increase, that would mean that you're looking at somewhere between a 15 and a 20 cent hash price per terahash per day if that 300 to 400% historical cycle repeats. Will that happen this time? I don't know, but it's happened the last 3 out of 4 cycles. The only cycle where that hasn't happened is the very first one, where there was no market,
Hmm.
there was no economy here, there was no real price discovery, there wasn't really a bunch of specialized, equipment and facilities and everything else. But for the last 3 cycles, what's happened. And right now we're about 6 cent hash price. So we're up
Mm.
almost double from the lows. We hit hash price lows of I think around 3.5 cents, maybe a little bit under, maybe a
Hmm.
little bit north of that, but it was about 3.5 cents. And we're at 6 cents now. So we're about double, but we're still a long ways off from that 15 to 20 cent
Hmm.
range that historically has happened. So I think it's just early days.
Boy,
And Bitcoin price is going to do what Bitcoin price does, and hash price is going to do what it does when Bitcoin price does what it's going to do.
right, right. And I would love that if the hash price gets high, because that means Bitcoin is freaking really, really high. So that's
Yes, it
exciting.
does.
I would love for that to play out here over the next two years or so. But um, where do you think? And this is kind of making a big jump, but it's what I wanted to ask you about primarily was we've seen over the last 4 years, really 3 years in particular, I guess, all the hash rate that's flooded to the U.S. There are not a lot of publicly traded miners that have huge international presences, and huge is kind of a subjective word, but large scale operations internationally. There's not a lot of groups. You guys are one of them. Um, I want to talk about the stuff you're doing in the U.S., but I also want to visit about some of your international aspirations and where you think the market is going to go there. So why don't we just start with that? I think you guys have stuff down in, well, you're in Buenos Aires right now, but down in South America, you guys do have a presence and are doing some operations. What do you think it's going to take to really see the market take off down there? Because I do think there's a lot of opportunities, but I don't know if it's just purely due to political instability or what it is. But getting capital dollars through publicly traded companies to set up operations down in South America or Africa or Central America, what's that like? And is that still an issue, you think, securing dollars for projects like that? And I guess, how do you see that changing or growing over the next 2-3 years through this bull cycle that we're entering?
Yeah, when it comes to Bitcoin mining, right, we're obviously location agnostic, right? What we are is very price sensitive. And so what we need to focus on as a Bitcoin miner is how do we manage our costs, and how do we grow cost effectively as a business? Um, we have historically, we just operated in Quebec. We were the largest Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
miner in Quebec. And in 2021, we started looking abroad and moving abroad. So we bought a site in Washington. We broke ground in Argentina. We broke ground in Paraguay. And we now have, an international portfolio that's a dozen sites, more on the way, across 4 countries. That's a pretty, I think, difficult thing for a lot of companies to replicate, because there's a lot of challenges operating in multiple languages. There's a lot of challenges operating according to different regulatory environments, in different legal jurisdictions. You have to learn a lot of things over and over again, right? Like, to build and set up a Bitcoin mine in Quebec is completely different than in Texas or in Paraguay or in Argentina or Washington State, or anywhere else, right? And so there are some challenges, associated with that, but we need to make sure that we maintain a diversified portfolio. And there are jurisdictional risks wherever you go. It doesn't matter if you're in just in the United States, or you're spread around the Americas like we are, or even have a broader footprint. There's going to be legal challenges and risks wherever you go. And what we wanted to do is we want to make sure that, even if something did happen, we would still be able to be fine as a company. If something happened at one
Mm-hmm.
site or in one country, the rest of it would still continue to operate, as expected. And I think that's one of the big, uh, you know, challenges here as a Bitcoin miner because a lot of times you're going to be focused on building one site, and then you've got all your eggs in one basket, right? And so while there's a lot of efficiency in just building out one site and fixing one site and maintaining that, there's a lot of challenges with not being diversified. Maybe that works out in your favor, maybe it doesn't. But for us as a publicly traded company, we really wanted that broader basket of portfolio so that we could make sure that regardless of what happens, we were in place and we were generating hash and we were able to capture that upside for Bitcoin price. And we've had legal issues in Canada. We've had legal issues in the United States. We've had legal issues, in every jurisdiction that we've been to and every jurisdiction that we've been at, and we've overcome them all. We are a proven operator now across multiple languages and countries. I think that's quite unique. But as we look towards the future, we've really neglected the United States for many years. Right now, United States represents about 6% of our hash rate. And over the last couple of months, what we've really been focusing on is how do we fix that and how do we rebalance our portfolio towards the United States. And so, we really focused in on what are the different energy markets in the United States and what energy markets are going to give us the most controls of our energy, because a lot of the energy that we have contracted is high uptime, but it's also fixed rate. And so, that's great when Bitcoin's going up because you're able to capture all of that. It's very predictable and your cost of operation is, very consistent. But when Bitcoin pulls back, if you don't have those levers of control to adjust your performance, adjust your energy efficiency, adjust with, your uptime in order to avoid higher price hours and drive your price down, you lose a lot of flexibility. And so that was the area in our portfolio that we thought was really missing. And so we've really been focused on filling that back in. We think PJM is the best energy market in the United States. It's the largest wholesale electricity market in the US. They have a ton of economic demand response programs, curtailment programs that enable you to capture those levers. And so what we've been focusing on is how do we get how do we get a significantly more US-centric portfolio? And what we've done here is we've acquired this Sharon, Pennsylvania site, and we've acquired Stronghold Digital. We expect to close that in Q1 of next year. And when that happens, we're going to have 427 megawatts, for building out and filling next year in Pennsylvania. It's a bigger footprint than we have active today, all in Pennsylvania, which is historically like this is the energy state, right? Like this is the state that powered the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, it's where oil and gas got going. Right. It's where coal got going. It's where steel got going. This is the steel that built the railroads, and it's the steel that built the battleships that fought in World War I and World War II. Like this is the energy hub of America. And I think it's largely been, over the last maybe 40 years as a lot of industry in the United States and the Western world was exported out and outsourced to other countries, mostly China and a few other places. All of this energy infrastructure, which used to power heavy industry, remained, and it got neglected and it got overlooked. And so when we're looking for where's the best cost power, where are the best opportunities to grow, we think it is in the United States right now, right? We think the opportunities are there. And under a Trump administration, those opportunities get vastly more political support. They get vastly, I think, easier and more valuable to develop. And so that's really been our focus right now. And with our new deployment schedule, we should have about 75% of our hash rate in North America between US and Canada in the first half of next year. Whereas, a few months ago, we were planning to have 45% in North America and 55% in LATAM. So we've done a huge rebalance here towards the United States. And I think this timing is perfect.
Yeah, no kidding. I think we got the most business-friendly administration ever coming into office. So, you couldn't pick a better time to do that. Pennsylvania, I mean, you're going to have a bunch of Texas bros that would argue with you about it being the energy hub, but That's a valid debate.
It's
But there
a
has
it's a
been
historical energy hub, right? You know,
right. Okay. Yeah.
Texas is not where the steel and the coal and the oil and gas that drove the Industrial Revolution. It didn't come from Texas. It came from
Right.
Pennsylvania.
Ben, you better be careful, man. I'm about to go to the Blockchain Council conference. This is coming out afterwards, so I'm not going to get accosted by anybody. But yeah. So Pennsylvania, in particular, though, it's had a weird relationship with Bitcoin politically as a state, not from the federal side, but over the last few years. I remember there being some bills introduced that were not Bitcoin friendly, but then very recently, I think they passed the Bitcoin, strategic reserve kind of goal. Or I saw something about it that Dennis Porter
They
was touting.
introduced they introduced legislation in Pennsylvania, like state legislation for introducing a state-based strategic Bitcoin reserve. Who knows if that will come to pass or not? But,
I was going to say, do you have any idea if
I have no idea if that's going to come to pass. Let's hope, because that will trigger, I think, a bit of an arms race amongst other states, and I think would give a lot of credibility for nation strategic Bitcoin reserves. But, we have also we have a Democratic governor in Pennsylvania, but we have a Democratic governor who's one of the rare centrists in America. Because energy is a big deal in Pennsylvania, and you're not going to get elected, governor if you're saying, "Hey, I'm against energy." It's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of the economy there. And so, it's quite rare to have somebody like that. And I think he sees the opportunity there. I mean, he's been out to the stronghold sites. He loves this kind of technology that is there for reclaiming the waste and remediating the land. And they're incredibly supportive of it. So he, announced and signed into law additional economic programs that make those sites more competitive for longer. And he's a Democrat. So to have that kind of bipartisan, support, I think is really, really healthy, because Bitcoin shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? This should be the one unifying issue that we as a country have. It's like Bitfarms doesn't know any allegiances to any political party. It's a tool available to everyone. And really, really nice to be in a state that I think has that bipartisan support.
Yeah. Is there a blockchain council in Pennsylvania? Because Andrew Birchwell with the Ohio Blockchain Council, I think, has done an incredible job. I watch what he's done with that, and I'm just very, very impressed. But I didn't know, what Pennsylvania's kind of, they have a lobbying arm like a blockchain council that or equivalent there.
I don't think they have one yet.
Okay. We need to change that. We need to get something
that's why I said
going
yet.
up there. All right. Good job. All right. Well, let me know if you want any help. I'm always down to help. So, all right. So you guys are growing in the U.S., and I imagine a lot of that is being buoyed by the wonderful team you're building, which I already brought up to you, but you stole Rachel Silverstein over there, my partner at Firm 21M. So congratulations on that. And I'm sure I'll see her at the conference, so I'll tell her myself too. But very happy for her. You also got one of my favorite people in the world that has been my buddy for a few years, and I've done some deals with in the past during his Boston days, but Liam Wilson over there. Tell me about the team you guys are building, though, because I feel like you guys are making some big splashes and just building a really solid team over at Bitfarms that I think very highly of for, personal and professional front.
Yeah, we've been operating for 7 years, and I think we've built a wonderful team over those last 7 years. But as we're looking forward towards the future and what we're going to be building and the kind of scale that we're operating at and our ambitions as a company, we've got to keep bringing in top tier talent. And what we've managed to do over the last couple of months, we brought in Liam Wilson over here as COO, who's an absolute rock star in terms of managing company operations and relationships and contractors and making sure that all the trains run on time. Absolute stud. When we brought in
And he's just
Alex
cool.
Brammer, oh, he's
Oh
very
yeah,
cool.
I forgot about Brammer.
You forgot about Brammer.
I forgot about
Liam will
Brammer. My
make you
bad,
want to
Alex.
say
My bad.
Liam will make you want to say mate a lot. It really wasn't in my vocabulary,
Yeah.
but after working with an Australian, it just kind of sneaks in there. Um, we brought in Alex Brammer recently, taking over on the mining operations. And that was a really hard role to fill, kind of in terms of where I used to sit. But we got a certified badass in Alex Brammer. This guy
Yep.
is a very, very capable manager. He's a very capable individual. He knows how to build and operate these sites. He knows how to manage people and relationships. He knows about the technology. He knows about the underlying energy infrastructure. He brings that military discipline and organization to our operations, which is fantastic. We brought in Rachel Silverstein, as you mentioned, who's a fantastic, lawyer. She's worked with us on a couple of deals, and she's a proven closer. This industry wastes no time, and we move at the speed of light. We need people who know what they're doing and who are able to get things over the line. And, we've really built up a tremendous team over here. We're continuing to bolster our bench here. But it was just incredible. We've kind of assembled the A team here, picking a lot of fantastic people out from, all these different conferences and meetings and conversations we've been having over the last few years. Kind of been building this Rolodex in the back of my brain, about who we need to have on the team. And the stars have really been aligning here, I think, when it comes to Bitfarms as well. Bringing all these people together at just kind of the right time for us to launch this next phase of the company's growth and the company's future. So very, very exciting times here. And I couldn't have asked for a better team.
Yeah, no, you guys have done a good job. And with that team, are you guys still in buy mode? Are you looking to grab more sites still? Or are you guys looking for more kind of development now and building out the sites that you've already acquired? Because you guys have been on a little bit of a spree here, acquisition spree. But I guess what's the next 6 to 9 months objective?
Yeah, so we've got a huge portfolio of energy assets with the Stronghold transaction, assuming that closes, as we anticipate it to in Q1 of next year. We've got a portfolio of assets about 955 megawatts for the end of next year. That's largely in the United States and North America, but we still have, a huge LATAM portfolio. It's going to be about 340 megawatts in LATAM. So we represent about 35% of that portfolio. We've always got an eye out for cost-effective power and new sites. Saylor likes to say Bitcoin's backed by energy, and we think energy is the most important thing as a Bitcoin miner. It's the asset that has the stickiness over many years. The Bitcoin miners are constantly going through an upgrade cycle. They're constantly introducing new miners, different efficiencies. The price points are constantly changing and in flux. But the energy assets are what provide consistent value year over year. And so we're always on the lookout for cost-effective and attractive energy assets. But right now, I think our focus is really on building out and monetizing the energy assets in our pipeline. We've got 520 megawatts for next year. That's flexible capacity. About 2/3 of that is in the United States. But to have a half a gigawatt of flexible capacity going into a Bitcoin bull market is a really, really rare thing. And it takes a lot of work to line up these kind of ducks to align with these historical cycles. We have right now what everyone wants, which is megawatts, and megawatts coming very, very soon. It doesn't matter if you're looking at Bitcoin mining or HPC and AI, like megawatts is the bottleneck for growth. Megawatts is the thing that drives that long-term value. And that's what we have a bunch of. So our focus right now is really going to be utilizing and monetizing those megawatts to capture the most upside and drive the most value for our shareholders in this bull run. And for other assets, we're always going to be looking to add on to our portfolio. But I think we would prefer to be looking for assets kind of that take a little bit longer to build out, and focusing in 2025 on the assets that we already have.
Yeah. So on that, you mentioned AI. That probably might be my thing I can wrap up with you on. So, but what is your guys' thoughts on AI? Are you gonna get into AI development, or because you do have obviously a substantial amount of power? I know that's very capital intensive to actually build out the infrastructure for AI, but what's everybody we talk to, they are acting like there's some aspect of it that they want to roll in, some more than others. But where's kind of Bitfarms fall in that arena, and how's it compete with when you're evaluating what you can do for a Bitcoin mining operation? You're going to start turning revenue quicker, I think, on a Bitcoin mine than you will AI. But is there kind of, I guess, long-term growth versus earlier returns? Like, where's it? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I think the best return on invested capital still is with Bitcoin mining for the next 12, 15 or so months. And so our focus is on Bitcoin mining, but there will be a correction on Bitcoin mining economics. There will be a correction on Bitcoin price. Nothing goes up forever. Bitcoin is not an exception to this rule. It goes up, it goes down. Hash price goes up, it goes down. And where we really are looking at HPC and AI is saying, look, what are our core competencies and strengths as an organization? Our core competencies and strengths are a huge amount of high quality energy assets that we have in our portfolio, and our ability to develop energy infrastructure. And what are the best marketplaces for that? What are our best opportunities to monetize those core competencies and strengths? Bitcoin mining is the obvious one because it's what we've been doing, and there's no customers other than the Bitcoin network, so it becomes a very simple thing that's all in our control. But looking beyond that, do we want to be in a position where when Bitcoin price inevitably falls back, we're just going to fall all the way down with it, or do we want to have some diversification around that same time? And we've been preparing for the bull market for the last 2 years. We're also preparing for the inevitable bear market, right? It's if you're getting ready for the cycle as the cycle is already in place, it's too late.
Yeah, you're too late.
You need to do the work now to be ready when it happens. And nothing happens overnight when it comes to infrastructure or operations. A lot of things take a lot longer than people expect. And so our goal right now is, how do we get comfortable with this technology and this different kind of infrastructure, the different kind of equipment, the different kind of operational procedures, the different kind of software management systems, the different kind of contractual terms and requirements for these sites. How do we get comfortable with this now? So when that bear market inevitably happens, we're ready and we can have some diversification in our portfolio that helps us weather out that storm, which helps us to provide, consistent cash flow and profitability for the company, so that we can get ready for the next bull market, which will happen around 2028, right? 2029. Like, you have to be thinking in cycles. And if you're a Bitcoin miner who expects everything to go up forever, you probably won't make it to the next cycle.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's shown, no matter how many times it shows itself to be true, people inevitably get caught up in it, and we will see the same thing on this one too. But all right, wrapping up, what is something that in your mind, especially because you've been around this for so long, that people are not talking about that you think is going to become kind of a bigger issue over this cycle that we're coming into? Like, where do you see the industry changing? Because I do think there's always a change through every cycle, people learning things. What's going to be the one difference that you think that will exist compared to the last bull cycle we went through? What will be different this time?
It's a great question. I think the big thing that's different this time is the amount of kind of major capital at work here.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to think about the halving epochs as maturity cycles. And the very first cycle, it's like computer nerds. There's no market. There's no price. It's like, you're doing it because you think it's cool. And if you get some Bitcoins and maybe there's some value out of that, awesome. But it really wasn't until kind of the tail end of that cycle where you started getting specialized equipment and people started building specialized, little data centers for it, really small specialized data centers, but starting to invest in it, Bitcoin mining as a business. That second having epoch really was the entrepreneurial stage where people were saying, hey, I'm actually going to try and invest dollars to get a competitive advantage over somebody else by buying this specialized hardware or building this site or moving to a different location where the power price is lower. That was when you had the entrepreneurs. The third halving epoch cycle was, I think, the industrial cycle where those entrepreneurs said, you know what, and actually in order to compete, I need to scale up. I need to go bigger. I need to think bigger. I need to attract investors. I need to actually take this to the next level. The last cycle that we were in was what I call the corporatization cycle. And this is when you started realizing that, hey, now that you have achieved scale, how do you continue financing the growth of a business that's at scale? You need to start seeking capital in other means. You need to start getting more professional. You need to start actually keeping, actual like accounting books that maybe a lot of Bitcoin miners, when they first start out are not really doing any accounting. You need to get professional in order to tap into these capital markets. And so you saw this huge increase of publicly traded Bitcoin companies going from about 3 or 4 in the previous cycle to, over 20 in the last cycle. This cycle now, I think, is the institutional cycle, and the amount of capital that's being pumped into things like ETFs and MicroStrategy and converts and all of these different areas. I mean, it dwarfs the amount of capital that's been flooding into this industry over the last few cycles. And we would have never been able to get to this point if it wasn't for the previous cycles. It wasn't for the previous step after step, building, on layer on top of layer. There's no way you get fidelity investing into Bitcoin if it's run, purely out of guys out of their garage, right? You need the companies like Bitfarms who are publicly traded, who are audited by, a big four company, who have that track record, who you feel confident are actually going to be there, are going to last, and are going to be there to secure the network. And so the amount of capital that's flowing around right now, I think it dwarfs anybody's imagination. The amount of capital in this world is like infinite. And it flows and it needs to be redirected, and it doesn't say stagnant. Stagnant capital is dead capital. Bitcoin is like the fastest moving thing on the planet. And the amount of interest here and the kind of players who are looking at Bitcoin, seriously for the first time, it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I really don't think people understand the full extent of what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, dude, you're getting me all excited. I agree completely. I think a lot of it's going to come from groups just seeing, I mean, to go back to Trump, but like the reality of what him jumping on the Bitcoin bandwagon, even though I don't think he has a really solid grasp of like Bitcoin and what it is and why it's different. I don't think he fully understands that, but he's going to, I do see him surrounding himself with people who do. And I also see just the legitimacy that an endorsement that Trump has had on Bitcoin, what that does for people that traditionally never would have been a part of the market, and then on the retail level, and then what it does kind of on the commercial level or institutional level is a whole nother ballgame that it's opening capital to. But then also from kind of the sovereign wealth funds and the international governments, I think they are going to have to jump on this whole race. And I feel like that's what's getting started here is some type of Bitcoin
arms race,
custody race from a government level. And to think what that could do from just a market cap perspective for Bitcoin, I don't think anybody, I agree with you, I don't think anybody has a real understanding or grasp of what that can do and what it can do in a very, very, very short amount of time. So I'm with you, dude. totally. I think we are in a whole new world. So look, man, thank you for coming on. I was sorry for the little technical difficulties early on, but I'm excited about Bitfarms. I love the team that you guys are building. Even though you taking Rachel puts a little hamper in the firm practice, I had gotten covered up with some stuff too. So I'm very, very happy for her. I'm very, very happy for Liam, Alex too. I think that you guys and you too, Ben. Very, congratulations on the promotion. I think you're very deserving of it, and I think that Bitfarms is obviously trying to position themselves to do a lot in this coming cycle and a lot in the future. So I'm very, very happy for you guys, and I wish you nothing but the best. And I'm looking forward to catching up with some of your folks at the NABS conference or NABS summit, however you want to call it, here this week. So yeah, man, let me know if you're ever coming to Houston. We'll go grab some Uchi.
That sounds great. Really pleasure to be back on the show, Justin. Again, sorry I stole away your partner, but not really that sorry because I'm really glad she's on.
No, it's all good. I'm happy for her too, man. She's good. You'll be excited. Obviously, you guys know that. But
you
yeah,
guys
man.
had your own halving event this year because I stole her.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. She was probably the more valuable half, but that's all right. It's probably more of like a quarter. Yeah, I'm the quarter leftover. She's the 3/4 that went away, but it's all good, man. I'm happy for everybody. So thank you, Ben, and yeah, I hope everybody enjoys the show. Listen, subscribe, and we'll talk to you later. See you,
Thanks,
man.
Justin.